It's not really stuff that we want to rethink about, so it's gonna be tough.
This dude is obsessed with me, and he's flown to New York to try to find me.
Due to the personable nature of the World Wide Web, many YouTubers deal with some fans building parasocial relationships with them. And while in many cases this could be innocent enough, I wanted to talk about the degenerate cases today, of stalkers that went way beyond the pale. Gavin has been one of YouTube's most long-standing figures, playing a key role in some of the platform's most successful content when it was evolving from a website for cat videos to a legitimate career path for creators. While he would become well known as a member of Rooster Teeth, Gavin also became one of the platform's most recognizable faces in the 2010s through his work on the Slow-Mo Guys, which has accumulated millions of subscribers and maintained its success ever since its launch. Meg Turney has also been a long-standing figure in the community. She began creating content as a cosplayer and vlogger, but broke through to a much wider audience when she took on a hosting role at SourceFed in 2012, and cultivated a dedicated audience of her own as she continued to hone her skills. In 2014, she left SourceFed and took on a similar role at Rooster Teeth, where she would stay for 2 years. During that time, she met Gavin, and the two began a relationship that continues to this day. In 2019, the couple suddenly appeared in the headlines, but not for their work. On the 26th, an obsessed fan named Christopher Eric Giles made an 11-hour drive from Albuquerque, New Mexico to the home of the celebrities in Austin, Texas, and broke inside. The 23-year-old entered through the back door around 3:40 a.m., armed with a handgun. Upstairs, Free and Turney were awoken by the sound of a gunshot and glass breaking, and they quickly hid inside their bedroom closet. They immediately dialed 911 and talked the dispatcher through the entire ordeal, staying as quiet as they could as Giles continued to move through their home. Luckily, the young fanatic was unable to find the YouTube power couple, and decided to flee the scene. He left the house and returned to his Lincoln sedan, just as police cars arrived to intercept him. As he backed out of the driveway, 2 officers stopped the lunatic and ordered him to show his hands. Instead, they reported that Giles shot his gun at them, and they quickly took cover. Officer Matthew Jackson returned fire, but only a few bullets were exchanged. The police heard one more shot from inside Giles' car, and when they approached the vehicle, they found him dead inside, with a single self-inflicted gunshot wound. A .45 caliber pistol was found next to his body. Meg and Gavin were quick to publicly acknowledge the incident, although they did not partake in any formal interviews regarding it. This was likely a move to protect their recently invaded privacy, but it would also help to disincentivize any other unstable fans from repeating Giles' actions. They each tweeted to reassure their audience that they were all right, and to thank the Austin Police Department for their quick response time. Gavin also briefly discussed the incident in an episode of the Rooster Teeth podcast.
Thanks for all the support online. It was a very unpleasant time, and also a big thanks to the Austin Police Department for an insanely fast response time.
As the police investigated Giles, his motive for the home invasion became easy to determine. His phone had been recovered, and it contained several notes detailing his feelings towards the couple. He had apparently developed a fondness for Turney through her content that had evolved into an obsession, while he resented Gavin for his success and the lifestyle that he was able to maintain through it. One note even read, quote, "I want Gavin Free to die alone with no children." After reviewing the footage of Giles' home invasion, a police report determined that his sole intent was to cause harm to someone who resides there, making it all the more lucky that he had been able to find the couple on that night of the break-in. In the wake of this harrowing night, Dr. Angeline Close-Scheinbaum, an associate professor at the University of Texas, commented publicly on the incident, labeling Giles' actions a clear-cut example of parasocial interaction, a term you'll hear a lot throughout this video. She described this relationship, which typically emerges between a celebrity and a fan, as a one-sided connection where a viewer believes that they are closely linked to another party who, quote, may or may not even be aware of that person's existence. While the emotions that these relationships can provoke are real, the connections are not, and that attachment can be dangerous. That fixation, which is often born from consuming so much of someone's personal life as entertainment, is a pervasive issue that has grown worse in the internet age. Hey guys, before I move on with the video, I just want to give a shout out to a new venture called 1 of 10. Founded by my buddies Internet Anarchist and Trust Me Bro, this is a community for small and aspiring YouTubers, offering foundational knowledge backed by experience and results. Why I'm a fan of this project is because it's run by real YouTubers that have been successful and not some fake guru. For absolutely no cost, you'll get access to guides crafted from experience along with monthly live seminars that will train you about all things YouTube. And on August 19th at 6 p.m. EST, I will be doing my own Q&A to answer any of your YouTube-related questions with my 15 years experience on the platform. So if you want to check it out for no cost at all, click the link in the description down below. In 2009, Christina Grimmie started uploading videos to YouTube, covering popular songs and building an audience of fans who could see a potential for larger success in the future. During this time, she also cultivated friendships with other famous creators such as Shane Dawson, making a name for herself at a time when internet popularity was reaching a turning point. But she had bigger ambitions than just making videos. When she released her debut EP in 2011, hitting 1 million subscribers on YouTube shortly afterward. From there, she continued to push forward with her own music career, doubling her subscribers and releasing her first full-length album in 2013. She broke through to an even wider success a year later when she auditioned for the 6th season of The Voice. All 4 of the judges believed in her talent, but she chose to pursue a mentorship under Maroon 5's Adam Levine. Even though she only finished in 3rd place in the show's competition, Levine still decided to sign her to his record label. From there, Christina stayed busy releasing singles and collaborations across the next few years with a 2nd EP in February 2016. It was titled Side A, and in the lead up to its release, she said that hopefully a full-length album would follow. But these projects would never come to be, and Grimmie's career was about to come to a horrifying halt. On June 10, 2016, Christina played a concert in Orlando, Florida. After the performance, she was signing autographs outside the venue, meeting fan after fan. At 10:24 p.m., she was approached by Kevin James Loibl, a 27-year-old who had traveled all the way from his home in St. Petersburg, Florida to see the show. But his true intent was revealed when he reached Grimmie in line, and when she opened her arms for a hug, he pulled out a gun and opened fire. One witness described the sound of 3 pops, and the crowd quickly began to panic and scatter. Christina's brother Mark, who was also her guitarist, jumped into action, tackling Loibl to the ground. Later, he would tell the press that the shooter had stood out in the crowd as he was noticeably much older than many of Christina's other fans. The 2 men scuffled briefly, until Loibl broke away and backed against a wall. As security descended onto the scene, he fatally shot himself in the head. When the chaos passed, Grimmie was also pronounced dead, leaving the world in complete shock at the suddenness of the crime. The murder-suicide evoked comparisons to Mark David Chapman, who had been obsessed with Beatles star John Lennon before shooting him. As the police investigated Loibl, a similar obsession came to light. He also appeared to have come prepared to do even more damage. When his body was examined, 2 handgun magazines, a tactical knife, a room key from a nearby Marriott hotel, and a ticket to Grimmie's show were found. Those magazines were for a pair of Glock 9mm pistols that the killer had picked up only days before the concert. When officers went to the hotel and showed the front desk manager a photo of Loibl, the perpetrator was immediately recognized, and had been reportedly acting strange since he arrived in town the day before. The killer's personal device did not yield many answers. His phone had been found encrypted, and the hard drive on his computer seemed to have been intentionally destroyed. When Grimmie's phone was examined, no threatening messages from Loibl were found, and the 2 had seemingly never been in contact before June 10th. But once the police began questioning the people that knew the shooter, his motivations became more clear. Loibl's father and brother said that he rarely left his room except to go to work, and neither of them could recall hearing him mention Grimmie before the shooting, nor had they ever seen him with a gun. One habit they did note was that he spent a great deal of time on his computer in his room, where his windows were found to be covered with aluminum foil and heavy curtains, drowning out the light. Loibl's co-workers had many relevant stories to tell, recalling he would frequently be teased for what they assumed was just a harmless internet crush on the young singer. At least 5 of them were aware of this fixation, having found the lonely man watching her videos on his workstation and frequently hearing him talking about her. Loibel's supervisor, Luke Dahl, never heard his co-worker mention the singer directly, but was once approached by another employee who said that his friendship with Loibel was in jeopardy because of what was called a, quote, unrealistic infatuation with Christina Grimmie. This was not the only relationship in Loibel's life that was affected by his obsession with the artist. Corey Dennington, who called himself the killer's only friend in the world, told the police that his delusion had emerged over a year's time. Loibel had apparently spent the majority of his last year on Earth monitoring Christina through social media, and everyone in his life watched him undergo gradual and dramatic physical changes. In the lead up to the shooting, he lost 50 pounds, had his teeth whitened, received a laser eye surgery, and got a hair transplant. Dennington told the police that Loibel had, quote, done it all for Grimmie. It's honestly quite saddening to me that this man had gone to such lengths to self-improve, yet for such twisted reasons that it was all wasted as he was never able to seek the mental help he so desperately needed. About 2 months before the singer was killed, Dennington said that he came to realize that this fixation wasn't normal. Whenever he tried to confront his pal about the issue though, Loibel would become, quote, angry and defensive, and even threaten to end their friendship because Dennington did not believe in his future with Christina. While Loibel apparently never explained what he intended to do if he ever met the singer, he regularly referred to her as his soulmate. The man's twisted view on that connection became clearer 5 days before Grimmie's show, when the killer told Dennington that he loved him, and that he was, quote, tired and ready to ascend. In the aftermath of the shooting, the now former friend regretted not noticing the warning signs sooner. But he had never heard his friend mention any acts of violence, so like the rest of the world, he was shocked to learn what had unfolded. While we still don't know for certain why he decided to end the pop star's life that day, most have surmised he came to the realization that if he couldn't have a relationship with her, then no one could. Regardless, Grimmie's killing provoked a strong response from her audience, peers, and loved ones, all of whom expressed disbelief at the unexpected brutality of the attack. Her friend Bria Kelly would soon take action and fight to pass a law that would increase security measures for venues like the one where Grimmie died. Another friend, Ashley Nicole, said that Christina had never openly worried about security since she maintained such an open and warm relationship with her audience. Her old friends from YouTube shared that affection as well, and she was given a tribute at the 2016 Streamy Awards, which was tearfully introduced by Shane Dawson.
Christina Grimmie was one of my very favorite people, not only because she was caring and humble and always made people feel like they mattered, but because the first thing she said when she met me was, OMG, your videos are really, really gross, but for some reason, I love you.
On June 17th, Grimmie was laid to rest in a private ceremony in her New Jersey hometown, in a service that was paid for by her mentor, Adam Levine. A few days later, the police closed their investigation into Kevin Loibel, leaving only grief for what had been lost. The next story involves another notable figure from the early years of YouTube, Jenna Marbles. From her debut in 2010, Jenna's popularity skyrocketed as she produced comedy skits and vlogs that would eventually accumulate almost 2 billion views. For over a decade, she gained 20 million subscribers and remained a key figure on the platform. But like many edgy comedians from the early internet, her past work eventually came back to haunt her. On June 25, 2020, Jenna, whose real last name is Mori, uploaded an apology in response to a video of hers that had been resurfaced from 2011. In the video, Jenna had performed an impression of rapper Nicki Minaj in blackface. Because of this, she announced that she was choosing to retire from YouTube entirely, and soon disappeared from social media altogether. Since then, the few updates that Jenna's audience were able to receive came from her husband, Julian Salamita, who also works as a content creator across YouTube and Twitch. But on January 2nd, 2023, a post appeared on his Instagram that shocked the couple's fans. According to him, a woman had broken into their home that day, entering through the back door and surprising Julian. This was apparently the second time that the stalker had come by their house that day, but the attempt to get inside was still unexpected. Julian's post also revealed that the intruder had been harassing the couple at home for 2 months before this incident. He maintained that neither he nor his wife had any idea who she was, so he did not know what to expect from her once the harassment escalated to this point. Once he realized what was happening, Julian reacted quickly, subduing her with pepper spray and managing to lock her outside. Once he was safe, he phoned the police, who arrived and apprehended the woman after taking her to a nearby hospital. A Los Angeles Police Department spokesperson confirmed the arrest shortly afterwards on the same morning. This incident came only weeks after Salamita had announced that he and Jenna had gotten married after 9 years together, a relationship that had been closely watched and frequently documented as it had developed. It was likely that this woman had been following them, in more ways than one, for a long time. Julian had chosen not to share the details of this harassment sooner to protect his family's personal lives, and only spoke out when he learned that media outlets were planning to report the story, so information on the extent of what the couple had been facing from this stalker is limited. Sources that spoke to the press about the home invasion speculated that the woman would be charged with felony stalking, so her harassment was likely significant. As of now, no charges were ever reported by the media, and the woman's name was never made public. While the couple likely would have been happy to keep their stalker out of the public eye entirely, this incident proved that public figures can rarely maintain the privacy they deserve. Thankfully, Julie and Jenna and their dogs, who had been a staple of their content for many years, were all left unharmed. Although this incident was significantly more intense than a typical interaction with an obsessed fan, it was not the first time that the couple had publicly addressed their compromised privacy. Back in September 2017, when Jenna was still active online, a woman showed up at their house one day, having driven into the neighborhood with her young son. When Julian answered the door, she asked him if this was the street that Jenna Marbles lived on. Although Julian immediately told the mother that her coming to his house wasn't okay, she defended her actions by claiming that many parents were taking their kids to YouTubers' houses. So the trip had likely come about by her son's request. But even if she had been coerced by her child into driving there, Julian still placed the blame for the encounter firmly on the parent. He also expressed discomfort with the idea that Jenna would have answered the door if he hadn't been home, and likely would have felt pressured to take a photo or justify the encounter in some way. Julian talked about this experience in a video simply titled, "Don't Come to Our House," which is a sentiment that many YouTubers have echoed over the years, especially those who feature their homes prominently in their content. It can be easy to forget, especially for younger viewers, that these homes are not just places where famous people hang out. And just because they have been given access to them through content, doesn't mean that they are entitled to make themselves a part of that world in reality. Our next story covers a creator who has maintained a rather volatile reputation, Gabbie Hanna. After first finding an audience on Vine, Gabbie dipped her toes into a number of different content forms ranging from comedy to music. Over time, she has also become increasingly open about her struggles with mental health, as she slowly dipped into what many would refer to as lolcow status. But the backlash that Gabbie has received has sometimes escalated beyond just criticism. On May 8, 2020, she published a series of tweets revealing that she had been dealing with a persistent stalker, and begged them to leave her and her family alone. She also described how the situation had been affecting her, causing a great deal of paranoia and making it difficult to interact with fans since, quote, "You never know if it's the person that hurt you behind the keyboard." It was never revealed whether this individual was an especially harsh critic or a dangerously enthusiastic fan, but it was not the last time that Gabbie had to deal with this type of behavior. In August of 2020, Gabbie suddenly began uploading a notably large amount of videos to her TikTok account, over 100 per day, all of them very emotionally charged. In the midst of this frantic posting, another figure suddenly became part of the content, a man known simply as Nicholas, a stranger who Gabbie said she invited into her house to use the bathroom.
A friend just texted me and I told him that I was gonna go on a run for a guy who showed up at my house. He asked to pray with me. It was really nice. And his text was, "Gab, listen to me now. Get that man out of your house."
Over the course of 9 videos, still posted in quick succession, Gabbie appeared to grow close with this stranger, referring to him as a lost soul and a brother in Christ, and expressed her joy at meeting him so unexpectedly. Throughout the rest of the day, they prayed together, listened to music, shared coffee, and were even getting ready to go on a run. During the flurry of uploads, one of Gabbie's friends texted her and encouraged the mentally unwell creator to get Nicholas out of the house as soon as possible, which she initially dismissed. But this was not just a random encounter, and throughout the day, Nicholas had been posting a series of videos to his own account. The first of these was captioned "Outside Gabbie Hanna's house," which revealed a very telling detail. The visitor already knew who she was, and was likely aware of the situation and concerns surrounding her. The subsequent videos, taken after he had gained Gabbie's trust, showed off the interior of her dwelling in great detail. It was never made clear how premeditated this home invasion had been, but it quickly fell apart once Gabbie learned that Nicholas had come specifically to seek her out.
By the way, Nick? Yes. I know you know who I am. Come on. Why did you lie to me this whole time? Why did you lie to me? That's for my acne, you dumb c***. Get the fuck out of my house. Now. Now. Now!
This video ended abruptly, and her next one simply showed her crying in front of a mirror, with a caption that read, "Someone just broke into my house." Many of her viewers saw Nicholas's presence in the same light, and wondered what could have motivated him to invade her personal life. In the aftermath of the day's events, as Nicholas was facing a storm of critical comments, he uploaded more TikToks and attempted to justify his actions. His explanation was that he had seen all of the concern towards Gabbie, including several suggestions that someone should go help her, and took it upon himself to do just that. Maintaining that his intentions were good, he also noted that his actions were not technically illegal, and that he left as soon as he was requested to. Thankfully, there were no further encounters between the two, and Gabbie released a series of videos the next week explaining that her behavior had been the result of a manic episode, brought about by her bipolar disorder.
You guys thought that I was dumb for letting a stranger in to use the bathroom? Okay, maybe. I sized him up. I knew I could snap his little twig legs if I needed to.
This added another layer of unease to the events, and left many onlookers thankful that Nicholas had not turned aggressive when confronted with the reality of his actions. In January 2019, another terrifying case of YouTube-based stalking emerged. This case is unique in that the streamer had managed to remain anonymous, with details only emerging after the trial had already concluded. Although the victim's name was never published, the details of her stalker's harassment and the plans he had in mind for her were disturbing to say the least, and only grew more with every new development. They showed an imagination for intense violence, and a desire for control that could only be forcefully obtained. The stalker's name was Kyo Ni, a 24-year-old from Estonia who met his victim through the online game Runescape in 2017, after discovering her through her prominent blog on the subject. On March 8th of that year, he wrote her an email full of pleas for intimacy and assurances that he was the only man in the world that could make her feel true love. In many ways, the message gave a glimpse into Ni's deranged perspective, such as when he wrote, "I may be a little psycho, but it's okay because we're all a little messed up in the head if you really think about it." He also referenced the, quote, thoughts and plans that he had been developing for his victim, although he could not explain these thoughts because, quote, Mr. Shadow said no. But this disconnect from reality, both in how Ni viewed himself and how he viewed his imaginary relationship with his victim, would soon become frighteningly real. The emails continued to come, with the next one starting out apologetic, but quickly shifting to demanding and threatening. Ni said there was no third option for them beyond a friendship or romantic relationship, and that he would ruin her life if she refused to respond to him. He also refused to walk away from the imaginary connection, and that this behavior, quote, truly shows how much I care about you and how much I love you. Later that day, another email came that shed all pretense of affection. The stalker promised to fly to the UK and make it his, quote, life goal to find and kill his victim. He wrote a long, gruesomely detailed description of his plans to kidnap, torture, and violate the blogger. The language of the email grew increasingly reverent as it went along, with Ni even claiming that his actions would be celebrated. One more email came that day and showed that its writer had fully departed from reality. It contained passages such as, "I am darkness and you are light. I am psycho and you're a social butterfly." This real-life Joker rambled about how their relationship was impossible, but also that his victim was not deserving of the relationship in the first place. After this, the messages briefly stopped, with the stalker having seemingly spiraled out of the fixation. But on April 23rd, they started up again. Nee sent the blogger images of himself with flowers and bottles of alcohol, again apologetic and desperate for any sort of interaction. When he again received no response, Nee sent a series of sexual messages so graphic that some news outlets refused to print them, and began to make more threatening promises of what would happen when he found her. From there, Nee's communications largely came in the form of what court documents would call bizarre tweets at the blogger, who continued to steadily ignore them. The most concerning of these messages included a series of photos of the victim's house that Nee took after finally traveling to Liverpool in January 2019, with the threat that if she continued to decline his requests, she would, quote, "see what I am capable of." Shortly afterwards, he would make good on his words. The same day, Nee was arrested outside of the anonymous creator's home. According to her father, the stalker had simply knocked on the front door, and after greeting him, the older man had noticed that he and his wife's names were written on his notepad. Sensing danger, her father managed to convince Nee that his daughter did not actually live there, and he quickly called the police once he was out of earshot. At the time, the blogger was hiding upstairs, just trying to stay out of sight and not provoke the stalker any further. While Nee managed to get away after that, when officers came by the house to drop off panic alarms the day after, they noticed him watching from nearby. When they approached him, he fled the scene and jumped into a car being driven by an older man. The police caught up with the stalker and dragged him out of the vehicle, arresting the driver as well. The man turned out to be Nee's father, who had offered to drive his son to Liverpool to see a football match, and had no idea what his true intentions were. While Nee's dad was intentionally under suspicion for assisting an offender, he was soon released without any charges. When the stalker's possessions were examined, he was found to be carrying a bizarre kit including gloves, an eye mask, a roll of tape, scissors, a screwdriver, a hip flask full of ammonia, a syringe, and a large golden adult toy. Nee had excuses for some of the items. He claimed that the mask was for his flight, and that the toy was just a face massager. But there was no explanation for the rest, and the investigation proceeded forward. Once his trial was underway, Nee's resistance to reality quickly fell away. He conceded that he had made an extensive effort to find his victim, and eventually admitted to 2 counts of stalking. But he denied any intention to commit a sexual offense, a more serious charge that the judge chose not to pursue after Nee argued that he would not have brought his father with him if he intended to commit a crime of that nature. The stalker had no fixed address at the time of trial, and sentencing was briefly adjourned while he underwent psychiatric testing to determine his mental state. After their evaluations, the doctors determined that Nee had a combination of autism and ADHD, and these inconclusive diagnoses led them to deem the troubled young man unsuitable for further treatment in a hospital due to the danger he posed to the public. Jonathan Savage led the defense in court, admitting that while some of his emails had been, quote, extremely distressing, Nee's true motivation was the pursuit of the relationship he had imagined, not violence. He also defended the strange kit of items that had been found in Nee's car, doubling down on the adult toy being just a muscle relaxer. The defendant's mother added that the syringe was intended for Nee to use on himself for an unspecified medical condition, while the ammonia was used to bring him around when he suffered from an epileptic fit. The bottom line of the defense was that Nee did not intend his victim any real harm, and that the items had to be considered in context with his newly diagnosed mental state. Judge Clement Gladstone accepted some of the defense's arguments, but did not concede that Nee's actions were without malicious intent. While she acknowledged that there might be an innocent explanation for each of the individual items in the kit, their presence together was more indicative of a planned action, and that the stalker had likely seen a golden opportunity to pursue his victim when his father had suggested the trip to Liverpool. While the defendant had previously told the police that the content of his emails was a joke, the judge did not treat it as such, and reinforced the stress and fear that Nee had inflicted on his victim, leaving her with persistent sleeping problems. Gladstone called cyberstalking a plague on the 21st century, and sentenced Nee to 21 months in jail, while also imposing an indefinite restraining order to better protect his victim and her family. The stalker's passport was taken, and he was set to be repatriated upon his release from prison. Even when faced with a stalker whose harassment seems never-ending, many victims choose not to speak for fear of worsening the situation. Often the public will only hear about these incidents when these unfortunate individuals are pushed too far. And in 2020, popular vlogger Yuipyon shared her story after reaching that point. According to her video on the subject, she had been patient with her stalker for over a year, warning him repeatedly that she would report him. While this would sometimes give her a break from the harassment, it would always resume. At first, the behavior was contained to just digital communication, but still went far enough that the vlogger said the stalker was able to find out which train she was taking or airplane seats she would be occupying when traveling. The line into more direct harassment was crossed soon after. Yuipyon mentioned that the turning point from confusion into fear had come when he had suddenly showed up at her house. At first, she had assumed that the person was just a particularly dedicated fan, but the true nature of his intentions soon became clear. This first in-person encounter was followed by many more, including a time when she was chased through the streets of her city. Eventually, he would even follow her during a live stream that she was broadcasting on a Korean streaming platform. Yuipyon showed a screenshot from that stream, where the stalker could be seen directly behind her, typing more abusive messages into the chatbot even as she begged him to stop. One of his comments that day read, "We just met by fate while I was passing by. It was just an accident." But it was too late for that defense to have any weight. This was the only time that Yuipyon spoke out publicly against this individual, so perhaps her response was enough to shake his obsession. There could always be more to this story that has been obfuscated by legal proceedings, but hopefully the streamer has been able to reclaim a sense of safety both on and offline, and she no longer has to keep looking over her shoulder as she shares her life with her audience. In the 2010s, Roman and Brittany Atwood were possibly the biggest YouTube couple in the world, who started off with prank videos before shifting to family vlogs. Their flagship channel alone had accumulated over 15 million subscribers by the turn of the decade, with consistent uploads since 2013 that gave the internet an extensive look at the adventures and pranks that their family shared. But in early 2020, that steady stream of content started to slow down, eventually stopping altogether. This wasn't just on YouTube either. Seemingly out of nowhere, the couple's entire social media presence went dark. Their audience was confused at first, but soon a more general concern emerged. After spending so long dedicated to the platform, what could have caused them to disappear? On January 23, 2021, a new video finally appeared, in which Roman and Brittany explained what had kept them offline for so long.
I'm excited to make this video, but it's like we have to kind of relive what's been going on, so we need to talk about it, we need to explain to you guys, and it's not really stuff that we want to rethink about, so it's gonna be tough.
Apparently, a resourceful and relentless group of stalkers had been aggressively pursuing the family for a considerable amount of time. But this group was not trying to foster any personal connections. Instead, they sent them a constant barrage of texts, voicemails, and Discord messages, threatening assault and death. Although Roman and Brittany regularly changed their personal information, this group was still able to track them down, and the harassment escalated wildly from there. Over time, these invasions into the Atwoods' lives continued to get more direct, and grew far more dangerous. One of the more frightening incidents occurred at a funeral, where the group called in a bomb threat that further shook the already grieving family. Unbeknownst to the couple, the hackers also contacted their car insurance company and canceled their coverage. They received a call from their representative asking why they had decided to cancel as they were out driving unprotected without even knowing it. The goal of the stalkers seemed to be to destabilize the family entirely, and they continued to send the fake mail to their home from fake businesses such as abortion clinics, which deepened the couple's fear for their children's lives. The content of their messages included threats to burn their house down, leaving Roman and Brittany in a constant state of anxiety as to what line would be crossed next. Even with this long list of violations, the couple stated that a video explaining the full extent of what they had suffered could be an hour long, and their breakdown had barely scratched the surface. Due to the intense nature of the stalking, the FBI eventually became involved, and dug deep into the torrent of abuse to find its origin. Obviously, the couple did not reveal the specifics of the Bureau's investigation, but they had apparently managed to bring the harassment to an end, and the family now felt safe enough to return to social media. Soon their content output started to flow more steadily again, although not quite at the same volume as before. Perhaps the experience had made Roman and Brittany more cautious about how much was being shared through their channel, and what vulnerabilities might be on display without intention. They called the return a fresh start, and both creators expressed excitement and optimism about the return. Although their audience was happy to see them back, the road still had a few bumps ahead. Roman would later address the ordeal in a 2022 episode of Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, sharing more details now that the pain and stress weren't so fresh. He reiterated that they did not leave YouTube willingly. They were told to by the FBI as their investigation had progressed, which only happened after an extended period of time where the couple had to continue to post as if everything was normal. As Roman told it, the vloggers had to essentially let the abuse happen in order to give the FBI more leads to track, a tactic that allowed them to find and apprehend the ringleader of the stalking group. But in the meantime, the issue still persisted, although from a different source. On August 31st, 2021, the couple uploaded a podcast episode that detailed another stalking encounter they had recently faced. The secondary culprit had developed a fixation on Brittany, which Roman said was the most common motivation for the obsessive followers the couple had faced over their careers, with one even going so far as to hack her Facebook profile and turn her marital status to single just to reinforce their delusions. This new stalker first began to send Brittany love letters, expressing a desire to save her from the miserable life he imagined she was living. He then traveled to the Atwood's former home, where they maintained their podcast studio, and broke inside. It was unclear what he intended to do if he found Brittany, Roman, or the two of them together. Thankfully, neither the couple nor their children were present at the time, but they shared that they had only narrowly missed their pursuer. After leaving the studio, the stalker continued to travel to various locations that had been featured in the family's videos. By this point, the YouTubers were aware of his presence, and had alerted the police to the vehicle they should be looking for based on their home security footage. Soon enough, the stalker was intercepted and arrested, bringing an end to the unsettling day. Roman said that over the course of this harassment campaign, Brittany was more scared than he had ever seen her. While these encounters are likely to continue for high-profile creators, Roman and Brittany have stated many times that after their extensive history with stalkers, they remain on a watch list for law enforcement agencies that track such behavior. Whenever they discuss the stalking they have dealt with before, it comes with a warning to anyone who might make the attempt themselves that they are likely being watched the closer they get to the Atwood family. Often stalkers take time to study their victims before getting close, but sometimes their more extreme actions can seemingly come out of nowhere. This was the case for Jessica Clements, a model and YouTuber who accumulated a large audience through her videos about fashion and makeup advice. While this area of content in particular has seen the birth of many parasocial relationships, Clements did not face the issue directly until February of 2019. The man was Soulaj Isak, a 40-year-old that hailed from Belgium and had previously sent the creator hundreds of messages on Instagram. When he did not receive a response, he chose to fly over to New York and seek her out in person. Jessica was made aware of his presence when he sent her a photo of himself standing in the lobby of her former apartment building. Apparently, he had been able to determine where she had lived by comparing some of the photos and videos she had posted to Google Earth, but did not know that she had moved out. The model's lawyer, Sal Struzzulo, later confirmed that Isak's harassment was the reason that Clements had relocated in the first place, and that the building's doorman had quickly jumped to action when the man arrived and demanded to see her. Soon after sending the photo, Isak was arrested and charged with stalking. In the aftermath of this incident, Clements' manager, Max Hirsch, contacted Isak and told him to cease all future contact with her. The lunatic's reply was predictably aggressive, which already included the quotes, "You're a dead man," and "I'll f*** you up." Since the creator was out of town at the time, Isak's charge was only a misdemeanor, but it still came with a protection order that would prevent the man from trying to reach Jessica again. Clements herself did not release a statement immediately, but soon uploaded a series of TikToks that described her side of the story. In them, she recounted the disbelief she felt as the situation was emerging.
This dude is obsessed with me, and he's flown to New York to try to find me. So I'm sitting there like, this is crazy, but there's no way that he's ever going to be able to find me. And then I start opening the pictures, and like, he's in my apartment building that I moved out of 2 months prior to that.
Afterwards, she stayed with a friend as her new apartment was still fairly close to the old one, and she did not want to risk Isak finding it. Unsurprisingly, this incident also prompted her to move yet again. Despite a court order, Clements had continued to receive hundreds of messages every day that showed a clear instability from their sender. The stalker apparently believed that there was a conspiracy to keep him away from the influencer, with one of the messages even accusing Mark Zuckerberg of being the culprit. The man had imagined a whole relationship, and somehow took her lack of responses as a sign of its veracity. The model also mentioned that in one of his messages, Isak expressed belief that she was talking to him through her unrelated Instagram posts and stories. But when she reported the flurry of text, which also contained threats against her and her friends, the police were initially not able to intervene because Isak had not yet taken any direct physical action against her. However, the messages he sent to her friends, particularly her male friends, had gotten so graphic and disturbing that she was able to file a restraining order in concurrence with his arrest. From there, she stepped back from the process to let her lawyer handle things, trying to put the fear and anxiety of the situation behind her. She also said that she did not want to give him the satisfaction of participating in their fake relationship on any level. The stalker was released after his arrest and likely returned home with a protection order in place. Since there has been no further word on him, at least publicly, hopefully this is where the story ends for the victim. Twitch streamer Sweet Anita has had a few run-ins with stalkers, and has not shied away from making the details of those incidents public. The first time she spoke out was in 2019, sharing details about a man who had been found sleeping outside her home, who she soon discovered was the same person who had been sending her harassing messages for months. She said that he had moved only a few minutes away from her home, and the police had been an unreliable form of protection despite her many reports. The stalker was briefly detained after being found with a knife, but despite the wealth of evidence against him, including screenshots, recordings, witness statements, and even a confession, he was released with nothing more than a warning. Anita was outraged at the tepid response from police, and her fears about what the stalker was capable of would soon become real. After settling in so close to her, he would regularly pursue the streamer through her neighborhood as she tried to go about her day, frequently moving close enough to provoke a confrontation. One of the more extreme incidents came when he followed her to a shop. When she emerged and found him waiting outside, she asked to leave her alone and if he had a knife, which he did not answer. She then asked him if she would be able to walk home alone, and while he replied yes, he started to follow her as soon as she continued on her way. But the two shopkeepers who had been watching the exchange quickly leapt into action, holding the stalker back long enough for Anita to get away without being followed. In her stream recounting the events, she said that this scuffle was far from the worst thing he had ever done. At some point beforehand, he had apparently physically assaulted her, although she did not go into further detail. The stalker was arrested again soon after, and sentenced the next day. This time, a restraining order was put in place barring him from Anita's town, and he was quickly sent to collect his belongings and vacate the guest house he had been staying in. The streamer expressed hope that she would be safe after this conviction, but the authorities' involvement was not as definitive as it seemed. You see, the obsessive fan was only given a suspended sentence, leaving him open to violate the restraining order without any real barriers. And soon enough, he would do just that. On July 14th, 2020, Anita tweeted that her stalker had resurfaced, sharing a death threat he had sent her on stream that referenced their previous encounter, and made it clear that his obsession was not over. Although she reported the continued harassment, the police apparently continued to be unhelpful, and showed a general misunderstanding of how her job even worked. They suggested that she simply lock her doors and quit creating content to stop the flow of harassment. But simple solutions like relocation were not a possibility for Anita, who was caring for her elderly mother and had a number of pets to keep in her place. That's not even mentioning her diagnosis of Tourette's, making it hard for her to have a career besides streaming. Without any reliable protection in place, Anita felt that she was being left to fend for herself. She continued to face regular contact from the stalker, and would even interact with him during streams. But this acknowledgement did nothing to dissuade him. Her safety was largely left in her own hands, and while she has not reported any further incidents with this man, she will likely never be able to fully rid herself of his presence. Still, the streamer did not let these incidents lie. Over the next few years, she would retell her story on podcasts and in her own videos, spreading awareness of how the issue affected her and how she was able to deal with the ever-present fear and anxiety in its aftermath.
If you block them, they know that you've seen their message.
Oh.
So they go, if I act badly enough, you'll react. And if I can get you to react long enough, you'll love me.
Unfortunately, the issue would rear its head again in 2022, when she revealed a series of strange DMs she had received on Twitter. In these messages, the sender had detailed how he planned to access the popular TwitchCon event in a disguise, so he could approach the streamer undetected. Although he stated he had no intention of hurting her, these plans had been delivered alongside multiple confessions of love, so there was an obvious cause for concern. While many people will claim that female streamers have an easier time getting donations and making a living, the downside of this is that they're also more likely to deal with parasocial relationships emerging. And this often leads to obsessive fans reading into the content they consume, and determining some hidden meaning where none exists. Somehow, Anita's stalker had convinced himself of the same thing, although perhaps the knowledge that he could only approach her in disguise indicated he had some awareness of what he was doing. But stalking is rarely the act of a stable mind, and Anita has highlighted that those who engage in similar behavior had a commonly persistent approach. She had frequently encountered users who would spam her chat with questions about her relationship status, or requesting that she create an OnlyFans account, and no matter how many times she blocked or removed the messages, they would keep on coming in. Anita also revealed more information about the stalker specifically. She described him to be a crazed homeless guy who had infiltrated her Discord server and gotten fellow members of the community to pool money and cover his living expenses. This is allegedly where he accumulated the funds to purchase a ticket to the convention, although none of his donors had any idea what his true intentions were. Thankfully, it appears that the stalker was unable to act on his plans, but the atmosphere inside the convention was likely tense for Anita nonetheless. Still, through everything, the streamer expressed thanks to her audience for keeping her afloat, and giving her the motivation to stick with her passion.
Sometimes it can be very wearing and tiring to have the same questions over and over again. Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have an OnlyFans? Do you have an Instagram? What's your Snapchat? And then there's people like you who make me feel genuinely happy to be here.
In the wake of experiences like hers, the prospect of giving up and walking away to avoid future harassment would be inevitable. But perseverance has been a common theme in these stories. And in most cases, the genuine relationships that are formed between a creator and their audience tend to win out over the imagined ones. Alex Belfield was a former BBC presenter who waged psychological warfare on his colleagues and self-determined enemies that drove them to the edge of sanity, especially when his abuse was woven into his content and amplified by his audience. This behavior would eventually lead to a high-profile legal battle, turning the online personality into a cautionary tale about how influence can be wielded as a weapon. Belfield's career took off in 2010 when he was hired as a presenter on BBC Radio Leeds, after a stint on a smaller station. Although he had previously shown a few professional slips, such as when he referred to a pregnant teenager as a dirty little tart, it was hoped that he would bring some personality to his new role. But the producers got more than they bargained for, and soon Belfield started to rack up a long list of workplace scuffles, whether by incurring a wave of listener complaints by making suggestive comments on air, or leaving coworkers in tears after angry shouting matches. After just 10 months, Belfield finally crossed the line when he made an innuendo towards the station's weather reporter, implying he had been pleasuring himself over her. Rosina Breen, the station's managing editor, fired him immediately. But as she and the rest of Belfield's enemies would learn, he knew how to hold a grudge. From there, the former presenter tried to reinvent himself in the online space, with a channel that would eventually come to be called The Voice of Reason. While he initially produced interviews with celebrities and reviews for theater and restaurants, he shifted further and further into the reactionary right-wing political sphere when the pandemic hit, riding the wave of anti-woke sentiment. But he hit an obstacle in 2022 when YouTube demonetized his channel, following a negative article in The Times that highlights the platform's increasing proliferation of extremely profitable conspiracy theory videos. In response to this revenue hit, Alex soon established a secret channel on his own website, keeping his content protected behind a £1 paywall. In many of his videos and media appearances, Belfield openly mocked the people he made into his enemies. Current and former BBC staff, political opponents, and anyone who had crossed him were subject to rampant criticism. While this was fairly common for channels operating in the reactionary space that Belfield was known to occupy, he would also often directly tell his followers to seek out his victims and continue the harassment on his behalf. Alex would take photos of his target social media and include them in videos, using them to twist narratives that his thousands of viewers accepted as fact. Even with so much of his harassment already in the public view, it wasn't until later that year that the true depth of his actions would be made known. 8 complaints, most of them by his former co-workers, took the online personality to court, revealing details of extensive stalking campaigns against them. Some of the victims had been receiving abusive messages from Belfield for over a decade, sharing thousands of emails, phone calls, texts, and other communications that they had received. Some of this harassment extended further than the victims themselves, reaching their friends, family, and colleagues, all in an effort to undermine their reputations and lives in any way possible. One victim shared that Belfield had lied about him having an affair with another BBC host, and thanks to Alex's considerable audience, misinformation like this was boosted, repeated without proof, and constantly brought up. These lies included offensive comments about their physical appearance, sexualized remarks, and false allegations that the receivers of Belfield's unending harassment had been the ones bullying him. The true scale of these campaigns is difficult to determine, given how extensive they proved to be, but their mental impact on the victims ran just as deep. The judge heard testimonies of victims talking about their mental health being shattered, living in constant fear of Alex or his followers turning up at their homes, with some investing thousands of pounds into security systems. While presenting evidence about his experience to the court, BBC presenter Jeremy Vine noted that he had been followed by a physical stalker before, but the experience had been, quote, a picnic compared to this guy. Throughout the proceedings, Belfield maintained his innocence, insisting that he was the true victim and he had been silenced. But that narrative was difficult to believe when weighed against the mountain of evidence of his actions. The trial concluded with the judge sentencing the online personality to 5 years and 26 weeks in prison. calling him a far more dangerous kind of stalker than the typical perpetrators, since Belfield had effectively weaponized the internet against his victims. The court also imposed an indefinite restraining order to prevent Belfield from contacting his enemies in the future. And while the sentence gave them some long-awaited relief from the constant fear that had been instilled in them, that relief did not last long. Within the same day, a video appeared on Belfield's private channel. In this upload, which had clearly been produced in case the trial did not go his way, Alex rejected all responsibility for his imprisonment, declaring that he had simply been defending himself against those who had been, quote, saying things that I felt to be untrue. He signed off with the words, "We will be back," which could be interpreted as a rallying cry for his audience or a warning to his victims. Within days, over 15,000 people had signed a Free Alex Belfield petition, and his core audience showed no sign of wavering. If anything, his imprisonment was further proof of his narrative, and that twisted perspective on events has only continued to spread since his sentence began. Liz Green, one of his BBC targets, said, "We were the learning curve for Belfield. He realized what he could do and did it with impunity. We were the warm-up act." It remains to be seen what will happen when Belfield emerges from prison. Maybe he'll try to rebuild his shattered reputation, or maybe he'll double down on his current audience and see how far he can push their belief next. So there you have some of the most notorious cases of stalkers on the World Wide Web. And although I don't think this problem will resolve itself anytime soon, I do hope that law enforcement agencies will do better at controlling the issue. And with that, I think I'll end the video here. So until next time, thanks for watching.